Good morning, everyone. My name is Paula Campbell, and I bring you greetings in the matchless name of Jesus Christ from historic St. Paul African Methodist Episcopal Church, lay organization here in Lexington, Kentucky. Before we get started, the opening song will serve as a part of our devotion this morning. And at this time, I wish to welcome my first vice president of the lay organization, my right arm, the one who I can always count on for support, Sister Carolyn Jackson, to bring us the prayer and conclude the devotions.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Sister Paula, for those accolades. Let us humbly bow our heads in prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for allowing us to assemble this morning. Please help us to gain something from this workshop that will enhance our Christian journey. Thank you, Father, for blessing us to be here. Please bless all of the homes that are represented. Please bless the sick, the shut-in, and the bereaved throughout this world. Bless our spiritual leaders, their families, and congregations, and help us to upbuild our heavenly kingdom by being about the business of saving souls for Christ. Please bless the children, bless the homeless, and bless the animals throughout this world. Dear Lord, I stretch my hands to Thee, for in this time and in all times to come and in all times in the past, we need Your love and mercy to cover us, keep us safe, and help us each day to grow in faith, courage, and love for each other. Help us to love each other, support each other, and do the best we can to ease all our miseries and pain. Help us to help the sick. Help us mostly, Father, to be kind to each other. For at this time and all times, we need to be kind and loving toward our neighbors and friends all over the world. Keep us in Your care, Father, and help us each day to work for the upbuilding of Your heavenly kingdom. Hold us close, dear Lord, so we won't let go. This and all blessings are offered in the precious name of Your Son, Jesus Christ, who died on the cross for us all. Amen, amen, amen.
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 Amen. Amen. It is with great pleasure this morning to welcome all our participants to the post-pandemic church, the new normal, virtual lay workshop. As my pastor, Dr. Reverend Robert A. Strode, says often, we are excited about what the Lord is doing. The workshop is packed with information we can take away and share with our churches. We encourage you to participate on all levels, and we want this to not only be informative, but very interactive. So our tech team will be monitoring the chat for questions, and feel free to raise your hand as well if you have verbal comments or suggestions or questions. Those who are on the phone can hit *6 to unmute themselves and *9 to raise their hand. And we ask also that you keep your devices muted unless otherwise called to speak. So now without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to our presenter. I am proud to introduce my mother, Bessie Jackson, the president, owner of Best Solutions, a professional development and management consulting firm based in Lexington, Kentucky. Miss Jackson is a lifetime member of St. Paul AME Church. Her love of God and the AME Church is reflected in her many years of servant leadership. She has served her local church in many capacities over the years. Currently, she serves as director of our lay activities for our local lay organization. Ms. Jackson attended the University of Kentucky and received her Master's of Science degree from the University of Louisville. She received her certification as a housing development specialist from Catholic University, Washington, D.C., and her certification in the study of urban problems and community development from Harvard University in Boston. She holds a Kentucky real estate license and is court-approved mediator listed on the Register for Court-Approved Mediators in Kentucky. Ms. Jackson is retired federal employee, having achieved the highest level of service for a government general service employee. At the time of her retirement, she was chief of staff and performed deputy regional administrator of HUD's Southwest region, which comprises of 5 states involving over 1,000 employees and the expenditure of over 17.5 billion in federal dollars or federal funds. He also has over 37 years of experience as an entrepreneur in the private sector. In addition to myself, she has 2 other daughters, the 13th District Dola, Priscilla Sullivan and Sandra Brooks, 2 grandchildren, boys, and 3 great-grandchildren, girls. It is my honor and privilege to present my mother, Sister Bessie Jackson, as your presenter today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sister Paula Campbell. Rudd, you did well. I know it's really not very easy to introduce your mother, so you did well. I'm trying to get my share screen up there. Let's see. I believe I do have that. And
Yes.
I am blessed to do that. Okay, can you see me now?
Yes.
All right, you did a good job and in a non-biased way, even though I'll have to kid you about that. I also want to thank Sister Carolyn Jackson for such a beautiful, timely, and heartfelt prayer. That helped to really set us off this morning, and I praise God for you and all the things you said. They're so important to us. I too would like to add my welcome to the post-pandemic church, the New Normal workshop, because we're so blessed to have the opportunity for another glorious day, even though we may see some clouds. God puts a rainbow and sends clouds and whatever is needed for us. So we give praise to him, and I want to thank him for such a wonderful day and for the opportunity to share with you today. I also want to thank you for the opportunity and for your presence here. And also, I'm looking so much forward to us exchanging ideas and thoughts, because that is so important as we go through the workshop today, because I want to hear your ideas, because we will learn from each other. We'll make mistakes together. We will discover new things together. But all in all, it's going to help us grow. And I think we all will from that. I do want to thank our pastor, my pastor, the Reverend Dr. Robert A. Strode, for his support. I know that he would be with us today, but he is physically absent, even though he's here in spirit. He did have a pre-scheduled Board of Examiners meeting, which would have been difficult to cancel. So he did have to move forward with that. Depending on how that goes, he may be joining us later. However, we do have our First Lady with us today, the beautiful Shelby Strode. And I want to thank Sister Strode for being here. Now, I don't want to go back over what our president has said about the president of the lay, but I do want to remind you to mute yourselves so that you don't have any background noise to interfere. And we will from time to time unmute you for the discussions. We recognize that Zoom is a little bit different, and I enjoy the in-person workshops when we can just all talk and everything together, but that's a little bit more difficult to do on Zoom. So we do have to be muted to keep out any background noise. But we're going to pause at intervals during the presentation because we must have questions and answers from you. And we must get your input in order so that we can be successful today. Because as Sister Paula has said, this will be a very interactive workshop. And in order to get the most out of it, workshop means that we all work together. We listen to one another now. We have different ideas. And as they say, different strokes for different folks. So all ideas are good and there is no bad question, but we want to explore all those new ideas. And as I think I mentioned, we will make mistakes, but it's how we learn. So it can only be successful if we make it so, and I'm asking for your buy-in because you can count on me and I want to be able to count on you too. I must thank our wonderful tech team, our workshop tech team, our St. Paul tech team. You know, they are the best. Now, we kind of keep them hidden between the walls of Zoom and Facebook and so forth, because we know that if NBC and CBS and MSNBC discovered them, they would try to take them away because they're so good. But so we try to keep them hidden, and I'm going to ask that after you see the wonders that they do for you today, you don't tell NBC and CBS because they may want to swoop down and get them, and we don't want them to do that. But they will be monitoring you on your chat. So when you raise your hands, they'll know it. And please feel free, they'll monitor your chat. So please feel free to type in your questions. Now, you did receive some handouts. And I hope that you had a chance to download those. We're not going to go through all of them today, but I want to point them out. We did do the GROW model and SMART goals and the appreciative inquiry as well as SWOT. And even though we're not going to do SWOT and appreciative inquiry exercises today, we feel that those can be helpful and give you some reminders of things that you do in order to organize your planning, because organization means success. So we just want to remind you how important that is as you go forward. We did also give you some information from the World Health Organization. In fact, the CDC, their information is a little dated on reopening some facilities. So we went to the World Health Organization, which is a little bit more up to date. I suspect the CDC will be putting out guidelines soon because places are beginning to open. But you've got some guidelines on doing some risk assessments, which is important to opening, as well as just some general guidelines that you can go through today. And then also you have an evaluation that I think the tech team is putting up for you, because we do want to get your feedback. That's how we know how to improve as we go forward. But one thing I do want you to pull is your action plan. You did receive an action plan in your handouts. And, you know, we go to workshops and things like this, and we get the great ideas as we're talking and thinking through the subject that of the concern that day. And we have the best intentions. And what happens is, though, life happens. We leave the workshop and we get so busy doing other things that we forget all about it. So the purpose of the action plan is that as we go through the workshop today, I want you to stop and make notes on your action plan of some of the ideas and things that you may think of that may be helpful to you or that you want to remember or share with others when you leave today. That way you don't forget them. And as a result, you may be more inclined to put them into action. Also, I do what I call a parking lot. And I see, I've gone through those. The reason I call it a parking lot, because in any setting, you come up with questions that you may not be able to answer for various reasons. We may have to go to another source to get them. We may have to get some confirmation from our leaders and what have you. So we're going to put those in a parking lot, and we're going to park them till the end of the session if they don't directly deal with what we're talking about. And we'll answer those after the session. If necessary, and we have to go to our elsewhere to get answers, I can promise you we will get back with you with those answers. If the answer, the question relates to all of us, we will make sure that we share those answers with all of you. So I know you've got your action plans out, and we're going to be looking at those as we go. But I like to go over our roadmap, which is the goals that we set. I know you received these when you got the flyer, but I always feel that if we are really in tune with the clear goals that we have when we're going through the workshop, we can more easily and rapidly achieve the results that we have in mind. So I'm just going to run through these really quickly, just to sort of remind us of what they were. And we're going to talk about the impact of COVID-19 pandemic. We're going to talk about the new rules of church going post-pandemic. The church members who will not return after the pandemic, the newly proposed digital world, which we are experiencing right now with Zoom, our consumer shopping and channel flipping, and the neighborhood church, innovative remote leadership, expanded fundraising, survival of the post-pandemic Black church, and failures to avoid in leading change. So those are some of the things that we indicated to you that we would be talking about. So we're going to stay pretty much on track with those. That doesn't mean, though, that as new ideas come up, that we will incorporate those in. If we don't know the answer, we'll find the answer. And through our discussion, we may even discover new things. So let's move forward with that. And I'm just going to remind you with the impact that COVID-19 pandemic has really been a challenge like no other we have experienced in our recent history. It is a human crisis touching every area of our lives, destroying livelihoods and weakening the foundations of our communities. It has exposed and exploited not only our health, but our economies, our societies, and our future. And as a result, we have been required to make changes in our businesses, our personal lives, and in our mindsets and in our goals. Now, churches have not been spared, and in all likelihood, they have been permanently transformed by the pandemic. Think about it. We've been out of our in-service worship for over a year. So we can think about whether we have been permanently transformed by the pandemic. We have determined, based on recent reports, that people who have been affected by COVID-19 surpassed 30 billion, I mean to say, that have been confirmed cases of people who have been affected by COVID-19, and more than 545,000 people have died. Now, the good thing is that about 33% of Americans have received at least one dose of the vaccine, while about 18% of the population is fully vaccinated. And these statistics are really pretty much up to date as of yesterday. About 2.5 million vaccines are being administered every day. So that is really means that we are going forward. And we're so glad that 3 vaccines, some more are under consideration, but 3 vaccines have been approved. So they're Pfizer, Moderna, and Johnson and Johnson. But that's going to put us on a strong path to ending the devastation of this pandemic. So where do we go from there? We got to think about the post-pandemic church, the new normal. Now, according to a Gallup poll research, the abrupt closing of in-person worship in churches, synagogues, and mosques around the country due to COVID-19 was one of the most significant sudden disruptions in the practice of religion in U.S. history. Never before has that happened in our history. COVID-19 has posed significant challenges for churches. There is probably not a single ministry in our churches right now that is not feeling the effects. This crisis invites and in fact requires churches to rethink and prioritize our ministries. Now, COVID-19 impact and the abrupt closing made us move really quickly to digital worship. And a lot of us re-recorded things we had because we had not done digital in that sense before, and we had to abruptly do it. Some of us were prepared for Zoom. We went directly to Zoom and Facebook and YouTube, and blessed St. Paul was able to do that thanks to our wonderful tech team. Some churches went to Facebook Live, and some churches even had to go to telephone conference calls. But it was an abrupt change. It changed our in-person worship, Sunday school, prayer meeting, Bible study, all of our on-site activities that we had in the church, our business and our ministry meetings. All of that was completely changed because we had to move to digital really quickly. Now that caused some stress because we had a new and we had unknown. We didn't know what was happening to some extent because the information on COVID-19, even though it came from the old SARS virus, the way that COVID-19 was affecting us and the rate that it was affecting people was very new. SARS didn't do it quite that way. Even though in some research it shows it was more devastating, it just didn't move the same way. So it caused us stress because information came out somewhat slowly at first. And then, today it was this and tomorrow it was something different. So it was new and unknown. But it changed how we had to outreach to our members. And that was stressful because we no longer had that in-person contact and hugs and so forth that we do. And members' needs and comfort zones were not being met in the same way. We had to come up with new worship strategies. So that created stress for us. How do we do this overnight? We had a digital learning curve. Some people had never given online. They'd never worshiped online. This was new to them, and they wasn't sure how to do it. And in some instances, and I'll use my church for an example because I know I was there, so I know what happened. We had to do training to some people to try to help them to get through that learning curve. We also had to give them different kinds of reassurances to get them through that learning curve. Uh, all of this was happening, and yet we didn't know whether we were going to be out of church for a month, 2 months, and it turned out it's over a year. But we also had the church building. Here it was sitting there. What happens when a building is vacant? We get other occupants, the rats and the roaches or other things come into the building to occupy a vacant space. So we had to know how to maintain that. We also had to maintain sanitation in the building, even though we wasn't there. So all of these things were very stressful for us. We had to reprioritize uh, our ministries because of the mandated physical distancing. We couldn't visit the shut-in and the sick. Uh, we couldn't visit the elderly, and they felt so alone. Some people live alone, and they felt shut off from the world. And this caused a different kind of stress, not only physical from the COVID itself, but also mental stress. We couldn't officiate at funerals. We had to postpone or do weddings very differently. And you know, funerals, how we send off our loved ones, has always been important. But we couldn't do that the same way. And then you have members who are living in remote areas. You have members that don't have automobiles and other ways of communicating. So there was that immediate impact based on the social distancing. We couldn't visit, and we wasn't really sure how to handle that because it was so new to us at that time. Then we had the financial impact. Number one, because of illness. Uh, we had to, there was a greater cost to us for that because we had to buy protective equipment and medicines, things we didn't have to buy before. We had people who lost their jobs because of businesses closing. And so they lost some of their livelihood as a result of that. All of us had to buy masks and more sanitizers and a lot of other things in order to keep ourselves safe during the COVID-19 pandemic. Uh, so that was a rising cost for us. Uh, our churches were unaccustomed to digital versus the in-service giving. We weren't passing the collection plate. A lot of people didn't know how to do that. So we had a loss of income from that. And more members needed to turn to the church for support because of this added financial impact on them. But they couldn't contribute as much because they had a greater expenses due to COVID-19. Then you had the impact on the Black church. Now, the Black church has long been the haven for the Black community. It has been the center of our life in the Black community. It has been the place for our spiritual nourishment. Think back, guys, ladies and gentlemen, it has been the place for our spiritual nourishment. Social connection has been in the Black church, community organizing, home training, encouragement, you name it. The Black church was the center of our lives. But COVID-19 tested the Black church's resolve. While we had to expand our imagination about how to function during the pandemic and eventually after the pandemic. Like other aspects of American society, the impact of COVID-19 on the Black church has been unevenly distributed. Just like with other churches, large churches and successful churches, many of them were already doing digital online and so forth. Many members, they were continuing to do well, but the small struggling churches were falling further behind because of the lack of resources. And the hardest hit churches were those with less digital presence. Many of our churches are located in remote rural areas. And some of them had no broadband access. So they were harder hit than those churches who were in more urban areas and had a chance to uh, have different kinds of communications with people, how to reach people by email and other ways. Uh, the physical closure of the Black church for the first time in history. And if you think back, I don't think that since we were I'd say loosely organized in this country under slavery, has the Black church ever closed. But it caused a uniquely negative impact on the mental health and emotions of many African Americans. And most notably were older African Americans who depend on the church for their social interaction and support. Uh, some with some people, even younger people, the church is the place where they have the social interaction. This is the place where they come together to communicate and talk with their friends and share ideas. And with younger people, how I'm raising my children and so forth. But we also, on top of that, had to cope with the societal effects of racism in our community. You had a lot of things going on. The Breonna Taylor, you had things like the George Floyd, you had many things that were going on. Black Lives Matter was bringing some issues to the forefront. So you had a lot of things going on in our communities that in itself was very stressful. But we didn't have the church to go to. Uh, and some of us couldn't get to, or we didn't have the means to get to, or even go to the online church. The pastor couldn't come by and sit with us and talk to us to help to ease some of the fears that were going on in our mind. So that caused even a greater sense of mental stress and loneliness for us. And then, like I said, the rural churches, many of them, and some others, even in the urban areas, they were not ready for the overnight. I say quick shift down here, but I meant it was like overnight shift to the digital service. And then, of course, important to us is the being able to have the end of life rituals that are so important in our tradition. And we had the trauma and grief of that. Uh, so those are other things that had such a great impact on the Black church. And then, of course, there was a decline in giving, and it was reduced. Research has informed me by 10 to 20% or more because we were not having the offering plate to pass. And of course, that hindered contributions because that's where many of us put our giving for the church. Some members were uncomfortable with electronic technology and they avoided giving online. Uh, and they just weren't comfortable with that. Uh, and I'm going to mention here, and I'll mention it later again, for us to consider adopting online giving and convincing members that it is a viable alternative to the Sunday offering. And we could give them some lessons on in-person, on online giving and so forth. It's really very easy and it is very safe. But some people are uncomfortable with it, but believe me, it's very safe. Uh, your information is encrypted and it is as safe as putting your money in the offering plate. Some members may have been affected only, and they wanted to concentrate on the stress and uncertainty that the churches were appearing to face at that time. And we had to, and I'm suggesting that that is still going on. And it is important for us to counsel members not to become too absorbed in the immediate challenges that we're facing with COVID-19. That is not the totality of our life, because God is in charge. And we have to always remember that. Sometimes, it seems like that the day is not at all like we want it to be, but God is in charge, because in times like these and through it all, we must remember to keep the faith, counsel, and guide our members and ourselves. We have to do some talking to ourselves too, to keep the faith in the hand of the man who stilled the waters and calmed the sea, the man from Galilee who died on the cross to save us, because God is in charge. And in times like these, we've got to remind our members and remind ourselves that faith knows no other situation in our lives. It doesn't matter, because God is in control. Okay? Remember, as members of God's family, we have a stronger calling of the church to worship God, serve God, honor God, and give glory to God in everything that we do. And this includes, ladies and gentlemen, how we reach out and worship with each other and how we minister to each other. And COVID-19 gives us another opportunity to help those that are in greater need than we are, who need special help during the pandemic. COVID-19 not only was very devastating to us, but it offered us new opportunities. And so we have to keep that in mind, and also keep in mind that God is in charge. So we have to still go about the job that he's directed us to do. Now, I want to pause here for just a minute for some questions and answers, because I know you've been quiet too long. And if I look at my group, I know some people here have some questions, but I want to pause just for a moment so we can talk just a bit about how your church has reached out to your community and how your church has been impacted. And I want to remind you to make some notes in your action plan. I would ask the tech team to kind of unmute you for just a minute or two, so that we can see if we've got any questions that are on the screen. Everyone has control of their mics. Do I hear any questions thus far? Comments?
Hello.
Hello.
I raised my hand. I'm Paulette Coleman from Lee Chapel in Nashville. And thank you for this great information. You asked what our church was doing. We have been serving in collaboration with the National Black Police Officers and Dr. Mitchell Butler's Dental, and providing drive-through food for people. And the good thing about the food is it includes perishable items like dairy, meats, in addition to the regular thing. And we've done that for several months. And we were responding to, I understand, several hundred, maybe even 1,000 a week. And we were doing that on Saturdays.
Oh, that is wonderful, because that is what the church is about. And COVID-19 offered us that opportunity, you see. And Paulette, I want to compliment you and your church for doing that, because it is what we do. As the old saying goes, it is what we do. Can I hear from some others?
Even say, oh.
Mrs. Jackson. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Mrs. Jackson, this is Darwin Eldridge, the president of the Tennessee Conference Lay Organization. And I just want to commend you on your presentation. I always enjoy hearing you and you always do an excellent job. And I did not realize you were a former or retired government employee like myself, but nice to know that. But I do want to speak to some of the things that you said, and especially equated to God being in charge. Several months before COVID hit and caused us to have to close our churches, I had entertained to our congregation that we get on Givelify, because we have young people, as you know, who don't order checkbooks. They don't even carry a checkbook. They like electronic giving. And so we got on Givelify months before COVID, and we have seen a substantial increase in our giving as a result of being on digital giving, making it available to our church members. We also participate in a food bank in our community. We are a very rural congregation here in Tennessee. And so we partner with the United Methodist Church and the Baptist Church and some other churches, about 5 of us, the 5 congregations who participate in that food bank. And so we support that on a monthly basis. So that's been a wonderful outreach that we've been able to take part in. And then one other thing we've been able to do, because our giving has been so good, God has been good to us through our giving during this period. Our musicians, since they are not able to play, render their services on Sunday, occasionally we're able to give them a rather nice gift, just to recognize that we still appreciate them, even though they're not able to receive that additional income that they receive from the church. So this pandemic has caused us to, I want to say, get much, much closer to God and to represent God in more ways than sometimes even if we were meeting face to face. So it's been a wonderful, hard journey, but we've learned a lot and we've been able to get closer to God. Thank you for this presentation.
Thank you so much. You take the words partly out of some of the presentation I'm going to give later, because the pandemic has caused people to get closer to God. The pandemic, as I mentioned, was a tragic effect on us. It caused a lot of things to happen, but it was also an opportunity. And as you and Miss Pauline has shared with us, it's given us an opportunity to do some things to help our neighbors and to carry out our godly works in a different way than we may have done. And you've reached a lot of people that way. You've reached people you may not have reached inside the walls of your church, which is so important. And you may see some of those folks help you grow your church after the pandemic. I think that is wonderful. It has renewed our faith in many ways. And I want to thank you too for your input. If there's no other, yes, ma'am.
Sister Bessie, this is Constance, and I love you, so I want to thank you as well for the information that you've shared. There was one experience that I didn't have, but the church that I grew up in during the pandemic, and it is a very elderly church, and the elderly were not happy with not being able to take communion. So the church did a lot of praying, and they had a group of people that went through all of the sanitation processes. And on Saturday, before the first Sunday, I think about starting in the 3rd month of the pandemic, they actually did a drive-by communion. And all they did was allow people, they put them in little packages so that when they did communion on Zoom the next day, they actually physically had the small thing of wine and the little cracker. And the elderly was just very excited about it. They took all the precautions. They had people check. But what we realized, it wasn't just the communion. The drive-by allowed them to see people. And of course, as you said, just being in touch and being able to have that connection with your church family was very important. So I was nervous about that in the beginning, but it ended up being very helpful to a very senior church in my hometown.
Thank you so much for sharing that. You know, one of the optimum words that you used was church family.
Yes.
And no matter how other people we may see in the grocery store when we have to go, there's nothing like that church family, because they are part of our family.
Right.
And it does make a difference. It does. I want to thank all of you who have shared. If there are no other shares at this moment, I'm going to move forward with the presentation. I don't want to leave anybody out though. Okay, I see all the other mics that I see are muted, so I'm going to move forward with your permission. Now, we want to talk about forward in faith, because now that the vaccines are available and we're starting to turn the corner on the dire effects of the COVID-19 pandemic, we enter the short-term and long-term phase of moving forward and reopening our church in a post-pandemic world. The pre-COVID-19 world is gone, guys. It is gone. And it's being replaced by a new landscape that calls for both adaptation and resilience, and embracing new ways of doing things and new ways of being church. We now enter the world of the post-pandemic church, the new normal. We're at the first phase of that, and we're beginning to think about how we start going forward. Now, I'm going to mention here some new rules for church going. Okay. As we start exploring the path for moving forward, it's time to think about the new normal and how we gather and worship when we do open our church, when we do reopen our church. The post-pandemic has brought us a new world, which will emerge with different expectations for social engagement, for cleanliness, and for protecting our vulnerable population, our vulnerable members, our vulnerable citizens. Even in the midst of uncertainty, pastors, leaders, and members can find hope in being able to gather together again. A good first step is to develop a church reopening contingency plan. You see, I think that if you don't have a plan, you don't know where you're going, you might end up any place. So you need a plan to kind of guide you. Plans are always flexible, but they can kind of, oops, I've got my phone, excuse me. They can kind of guide you. So our contingency plan should be compatible with what is happening in our congregation, in our community, and in our nation. And it should include SMART goals. Now, one of the things about the contingency plan is that it's a new sense of routine. So we've got to think about how we really put that together. And I always think that I feel it's important that we start out with what I call SMART goals. And I think you have that in your handouts because I don't want you to forget them. But SMART goals are specific. In other words, you've got to have specific targets. If you don't know what what you're doing, you won't get anything done. They've got to be measurable in the terms of progress and attainment. You've got to be able to reach them, and you've got to be able to measure that you can reach them. They've got to be attainable, because if you can't meet it, it's not a goal, it's an idea. They've got to be realistic. Otherwise, it's a dream. And if you look at the appreciative inquiry, we talk about dreams, but in a different sense. So it must be able to be within the resources that you have. If you're a small church, if you're a rural church, and you don't have broadband, you've got to have goals that fall within that category. It's got to be something you can reach, and it's got to be timely. It's got to be able to be accomplished within a given time frame. Now I'm going to walk through a church reopening contingency plan with some ideas. We only have a couple hours here, so I can't put them all in here, but we are going to do a breakout session where I'm going to ask you to come up with some of your ideas to add to these, okay? Now, the first thing you must do, of course, you have no choice, is to comply with all the federal, state, and local requirements. They're there for a reason. So we need to make sure that our plan complies with those, or gives us a platform to be able to do that. We need to know what's going on in our community. What is the downward trend? And hopefully it's a downward trend in our community. But what is that downward trend? That can help us plan for our reopening and how we can accommodate new members and visitors. We need to know our member and our community residents' vaccine rates by age groups. Have our most vulnerable, the older population, have they all had their shots? Because this has a lot to do with how we can gather inside the church, and how we can make sure that we take care and keep our population in the church healthy. So we need to know the vaccine rates. Now we need to think about phased gatherings, because it's all not going to happen at once, especially if you have a large church. Now, if you've got a small church, then you may all be able to gather, because we're talking about small group attendees initially. And we're talking about phase, the short term and the long term stages of reopening the church. So we need to have small group gatherings initially at first, depending on the size of our church. We need to think about shorter church meetings, because we need to keep people inside in recirculated air for shorter time periods, okay? So we think about phased growth over a period of time. We also need to think about a focused approach to pandemic-related missed in-person opportunities. Remember when we were in church, after church, we'd all come together and we'd hug each other and greet and say, hey, haven't seen you. What's your plan for the week? Be blessed for the week. What have you? Good luck on your whatever you're going to be doing for that week. We weren't able to do that in an in-person setting. So we've got to be able to plan for how we do that going back into our church, because even though we've experienced a pandemic, we are human beings. So we still have that need to reach out. So we've got to think about how we do that when we go back into church, and how we can make sure that happens in a very safe way. We've got to think about the emotional health of our members and our community. What is going on outside the church in the community as far as the emotional health is concerned about the pandemic? How do we bring that into the church, and how does that affect us in the church? That affects our members as well. So we need to think about that. We also need to think about the stewardship of our building and facilities, how we do optimum stewardship of that. How do we make optimum use of it? Do we allow neighborhood groups to meet in our church? How can we handle that? How do we handle the sanitation? All of that. We've got to think about redirecting activities that are non-essential to the church mission in order to maximize the post-pandemic focus. In other words, we do a lot of things sometimes that we really don't have to do. they are not essential to our church mission. And I use the word church mission, okay? Brother Eldridge mentioned that, but we need to think about that. Sister Pauline mentioned that in what she was doing. So we need to think about that. But some activities we don't do. So we need to make more room for those activities that we need to do post-pandemic. And the others get in the way. So we need to consider that, okay? The intentional outward focus. How do we reach out to people now? We've been not being able to do that for so long. How do we reach out and try to bring new members in? Because we still want to grow God's kingdom. We still want to grow our church, carry out that mission. So how do we make an outwardly focus? And it has to be intentional because we still have the emotions and we have the concerns and things going in the community. So we've still got to make the intention. We've got to think about how we're going to handle the online digital worship services and meetings anyway, because we really feel that those should go on. They become a way of life for many people now. We're going to talk about that differently later, so I'm not going to get into a lot of the details now, but we've got to think about how we continue the online digital worship and meetings. They've been a good thing for us in many ways, so people have gotten used to it. Everybody loves Zoom now, I always say. So we've got to think about that. And we also need to think about what we can do differently and what we can do better. Because we always have, we get used to what we've been doing. And so how do we make that change? What can we do differently and what can we do better? Because of the fact that we get entrenched sometimes in doing what I always say, doing what we've always done and expecting something different. So we got to think about what we can do differently and what we can do better. We've got to think about actions to over communicate the precautions that will be taken to ensure that our church, the ministry, and the common areas are consistently disinfected, that our ushers and greeters are wearing gloves, and that there are numerous disinfecting stations are available in the church for public use. And that is so important because COVID-19 has increased our awareness of sanitation. And people need to feel comfortable coming back. And they won't feel as comfortable if they don't feel that you've got the sanitizing mechanisms in place to keep them safe. So that is awfully important also. We've got to think about how we're going to handle our regular member communications. Inspirational daily devotions, Bible verses, announcements, things like that. How are we going to do that in the church? As we've done before, will we continue it? Is it the best way? Those kinds of things. We still need to reach out to our one-on-one members and our group members by email and messaging. We use call-in post at St. Paul. Other churches use it. I used to use call-in post, haven't for a while. Personally, I used to send Christmas greetings that way. But in any case, there are a lot of free opportunities out there that you can take advantage of. And there are paid opportunities too, depending on what your needs are. But we need to think about how we continue communicating. One of the advantages of COVID-19, as we've stated, and we stated in our question period, our comment period, that it caused us to see how we can reach out more because we weren't able to be inside the church. So how do we do that? And how important it is. So we need to think about that. And our social media posts is another way that we reach out. And we've done more of that since the pandemic has hit us, because that was our way of reaching out. So we need to think about how we do that. Now, I'd like to take just a few minutes now because we're going to have a breakout group discussions. Our tech team has assigned you to breakout groups, and I think they've appointed a leader for each group. And you're going to take a few minutes and talk about some of the ideas that your church can have for your reopening contingency plan. And then we're going to report those back so that we can share them with everybody. And I'm also going to remind you to make some notes on your action plan. So break the tech team, you can take over and assign people to the groups as you have chosen to see fit, okay?
Thank you, Sister
We
Bessie
will
Jackson.
continue. Yeah, we will continue after the breakout sessions when we do our reporting.
Yes. We have just automatically assigned you to a breakout room, and I have appointed a leader for each breakout room, which is hopefully you'll accept that appointment. And it's just as a recorder and reporter for that breakout session. So just let me review, and then I'll pop you in the breakout room. Betty Morton Young is the leader, recorder and reporter for room 1. Janice Floyd for room 2. Ella Smith for room 3. And these are my church members. So, I appreciate y'all's support. And Carolyn Jackson, room 4. And for room 5, Redia Walker. So please go on to your breakout. I'm sorry, somebody mentioned something. So I'm going to go ahead and pop you and open up in the breakout sessions, and just follow the guidelines Sister Bessie has mentioned about coming up with a contingency plan, giving some ideas on how you would develop a contingency plan, or what items you would put on your action plan for a contingency plan. Here we go. Here we go.
Priscilla, we need to get assigned to a breakout room.
Oh my, okay. I thought I had everybody. Hold on a second.
It's McKinley on 2 devices.
Okay, I assigned you, I thought. Let me see.
Was I supposed to click something on this end?
No, you shouldn't have to.
Okay.
Let me see, McKinley.
I don't see McKinley
Okay.
assigned to the room.
Okay, let me add you to this room.
Yeah, you've got her in room 2. It's not joined yet.
Okay, yeah, you're in room 2.
Am I supposed to click something to go there?
You shouldn't have to, but did you have 2 devices?
I do.
Probably your other device is in the room. So
I told you not to leave before you. Hold on, we're checking.
okay.
No, it doesn't show her there.
Because she has 2 devices.
Yeah, it doesn't show her in. It shows her there, but not joined yet.
Okay, and then like Thelma hasn't joined hers. Billy, I have you in here.
Okay, we got it. We got to. I got to move. I got it.
Okay.
You're good. You're good.
Okay, thank you. And Sister Thelma, you're the only one that hasn't. You're assigned to a breakout room.
You've got her in. You had her in room 1, but not joined
but
yet.
She hasn't joined yet.
Yeah.
Now she's joined. Great. Everybody's joined. Thank you.
Yeah, everybody's joined now, it looks like.
I'm in a meeting. Oh, yeah, I know you are. Okay, that was Reverend. So everybody's joined, and then the countdown is 12:10. So 15 minutes. Now, let me broadcast to the
Yeah,
break.
we're okay from time standpoint.
Okay. Okay. Hold. Copy. Come back. And then broadcast, breakout room. The time is 12:14, so that's almost 5 minutes. I can hear you shuffling that paper, Mom. Turn your mute yourself.
I'm okay. Breakout rooms can't hear me.
After this breakout room, you want to do the stretch. Okay.
I don't know, is that the next slide? Let me see.
Yeah, no, it's after the new rules following, so I'll do it after that. I got it.
Yeah.
Okay, I got it. So we got 12:15.
Yeah, we're on schedule.
Yeah,
In fact, we're ahead of schedule.
yeah.
Is the presentation okay?
Yes, going well.
Well, the reason I asked is we're ahead of schedule. Sometimes I talk faster than others. You know when I talk too fast or not?
$12.16. We'll come out at 10:20, I mean, at 12:25.
Okay. Is that enough time? Because you were late getting some people in.
I think so.
Why don't you give them 12:30?
Okay,
Because you were late getting some people in, so you give them enough time.
okay.
Takes people a couple minutes to settle always. Katie called late last night. She had a conflict.
Mama, she's on here, but don't talk.
Okay.
It's still being recorded and everything, Mama.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's why I said, just go ahead and mute yourself. Okay, I just we'll let him out at 12:25. So what I'll do is I'll call off the reporters' names, and then they can unmute themselves and give their, in that order, okay? In the room order. I know, I can't hear you, but I heard. You still unmuted yourself again. You hit it double twice. Okay.
You called them off.
I'll call them off in the room, not in the order of the room, breakout room numbers, and then they can unmute themselves and respond. But I'll go by your lead.
And I'm still sharing my screen, aren't I?
Yes, you are.
Okay.
Let's see who sent a text. You might want to read over some of the texts because some people did make comments. They just didn't, you know, like Lee Chapel, Nashville also provided vaccines for COVID-19 to our members individually last week, and all appointments were filed. Coleman made a few comments.
Can't you come in and read those texts and we can respond to them?
Well, I think they're kind of past note now. They were along with the people who wanted to actually speak. And so those who spoke, but they're not really relevant at this time. They were just comments, no questions. I didn't see any questions.
Oh, Reverend Strode is here.
Yes, he's actually here, but he's not here. He's still
Okay.
in his other meeting, but he has this meeting open. So I didn't put him in a breakout room for that reason.
Okay.
Okay, it's 10:21. They've got 5 minutes. So let me, okay, broadcast.
Did check with Paula Holmes. She didn't get the handouts.
Oh, we already took care of that.
Holly Smith, you got her? She's in.
Yeah, she's in there. She's in there. Everybody's in there.
And will you send the handouts to Billy McKinley again, please?
Okay, they're in the chat. Can you get them in the chat? We have them in the chat. Just scroll up through the chat and the handouts you should be able to see and the link, and you can download those. They're in there twice. At the very beginning and then further on down.
I see where Lee Chapel is also providing.
Yeah, that's what I just read off.
Uh,
Okay, they got.
We need to mention that, yes.
Handouts are in the chat, she said.
Okay, they got 2 minutes.
Did the leaders know how long they had?
You mentioned it was on here, 15-minute group and 15-minute report. And yes, I put that in the chat. I'm still posting to the chat. So I'm letting them know how much time they have left.
Why didn't you cut the recording off and resume it?
No, we want the recording. No, we don't. No, just keep the recording. When they get to 1 minute, I will let them know they have a minute left. And then I'll close the chat. Okay.
Oh, I see Reverend Strode.
Okay. About to close.
I can't find that handout in the chat.
Okay, Priscilla, if you can hear me, resend the chat the handout link in the chat, please. I'm getting ready to close the breakout rooms. Okay. Okay. Give it a second. And close out. Okay. It'll close in 53 and counting. People are coming back in. There you go. It's all yours.
Breakup room has closed.
Yeah, I think we're closing the breakout rooms. According to this, we've got 36, 5, 4, 3 seconds. It's doing a countdown for everybody to come out.
I think breakup room number 1 went pretty smoothly. I was not ready to host, although.
We have utmost confidence in you, Betty.
You want me to expound? This is Janice.
Yes, I will call out the breakout rooms in order, and then those who are recorders can respond to the ideas that were you came up in your breakout room. But I'm going to turn it back over to Sister Bessie Jackson right now, and then she'll let me know when to start that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Miss Paula. I wanted to mention when we were talking about what churches had done or had been doing during the COVID-19, we had an opportunity to share with a couple of people, but I noticed in the chat room that Holly Smith was on, and she mentioned that Lee Chapel in Nashville was also providing vaccinations for COVID-19 to our members initially. And then, let's see, and all appointments for that were filled. So I wanted to commend them too. It's so great to know that we're reaching out beyond our walls to carry out our mission of the church. So I'm so glad to know that, and thank all of you who have shared on that. Now I'm going to turn it back over to Paula. I know that during the chat room you had a chance to share some of your ideas about your church reopening contingency plan, and you've got an opportunity to report on that. So I'm looking forward to hearing from you, and I'm going to turn it over to Paula, who will call each of the groups to come forth and report.
I hope you all had a good experience in the breakout room. This has all been a learning experience for the tech team, so I hope that went well. I'll call out the first reporter in breakout room session 1, and at this time you can report out. Sister Betty Young.
Thank you, Sister Paula. Thank you for that surprise honor to host the breakout room number 1. But it went very well. I was pleased to have Sister Holly Smith and Brother Darwin Eldridge and Sister Thelma Emerson. Of course, I had met Holly and Darwin at previous biennials before, so we were already acquainted with each other. But we did talk about having a strategic entry plan for going back into our churches. Sister Holly mentioned that first they did a survey with all their members to see how the members felt about going back into the churches. And they came up with a plan, a 36-page plan for reentry. And they used the connectional guidelines to create their plan. Sister Holly also mentioned about making sure that you had enough seating in the church before everyone came in to allow for a certain number of capacity without overflowing, that you didn't want to turn people away. And that's one of the things that we had talked about at St. Paul Lexington. We wanted to ask our members to pre-register so that we knew how many people were coming, and that we did not have to turn anyone away, that we could direct them to the Zoom meetings as we are doing now. We also were informed that possibly some churches do not have a reentry plan, and that it's a good thing that if you do have a plan, to share it with another church so that everybody can be thinking on the same level and sort of have something, a good foundation to rely on when we do get back to going back to church. We also talked about having assigned seating, taking temperatures, having sanitized little stations set up at different places. Your visitors would be given a card to fill out, and that would be deposited at a central location. We also talked about taking photos so that you know who each person is seated with. They would be seated with their family, and that's how you would be seated each time that you come, and take a photo of that group so that you have some point of contact for tracing if anyone should come up, that they turned out that they got sick or anything. And the choir, possibly having pre-recorded music, possibly have limited choir members with the protected equipment, face shields, so forth, proper distancing, and then you could still have live music, but make sure that everyone is properly distanced. They are wearing their face shields or masks to make sure everything is okay and no one gets ill. And those are some of the things that we talked about in the breakout room number 1. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Sister Betty Morton Young. And next I'll call on, those were very good suggestions, very, very good ideas. Next, I would like to call on Sister Janice Floyd for breakout room 2.
Okay, this is Janice Floyd, and we touched on some of the things that Betty Young just discussed. We discussed on communion, how would be a safe way for us to try to have communion. So what we came up with, it's already pre-packed, and where, we can have a drive-by, and your hand would be the only one to take the pre-packed out and have communion that way. And then we discussed, disinfecting the church and make sure we have the proper equipment as far as the hand sanitizer, mask, and temperature. Then there is the social distance. I think our church has social distance to where we can see in the church and everything. Then it's the heating and the air conditioning. We have to make sure that we are getting the proper ventilation as far as the heating and the air conditioning. Then we discuss how many people that may have gotten the vaccines and everything, because, a lot of the people still live about getting the vaccine. And I think the majority of our church members have gotten the vaccine because we are an old congregation. Then we talked about the music. And like Betty had said, the music can be pre-recorded. And then we can continue to still use Zoom as far as our services. And then as far as the seating, we can have like a pre-register where certain groups come in at different times. Like I have a friend, and she goes to this particular church, and they have church service according to age groups. Like one Sunday they may have the elderly, the next Sunday they may have the young youth, and do it that way. And then, of course, if you have a member, then all the members can sit together. But I think at our church, I think the seating, you can have like 3 individuals on a bench, I find. And then that's about all that we discussed, similar to what Betty discussed. We all have about the same ideas as far as getting back into the church and everything. So that's the end of my report.
Thank you so much, Sister Janice Floyd. I appreciate that. And the next is Sister Ella Jean Smith.
Hi. basically we discussed what the previous two leaders reported, but I want to thank Sister Peggy Folks, Dr. Sinkfield, and Sister Shelby Strode for being excellent participants. And Dr. Sinkfield is going to share with you what Payne Chapel has put in place.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Sister Ella, and everybody. A few of the things that we've heard already are very apropos for this work. The fact of the matter is, this is an ambitious assignment. We too have put together an extensive phased out aspect of what reentry could look like. And in fact, we did it at the beginning of the pandemic, not knowing exactly when it would end. But let me just add 2 or 3 things that have not already been stated. First of all, I would strongly recommend, and we have done this, everybody doing what you can to expand your online reach and your online platforms, because I do believe that for some foreseeable future, we will be exercising some form of hybrid experience. That is where we have persons who are coming to service based on the restrictions that we've set, and other people who have been psychologically and emotionally affected by the fact that being in that close proximity to people makes them a little nervous. And so they've already experienced the blessing of what can happen online. We need to be prepared to even make our live experiences jointly an online experience so people can do what's necessary. So at Payne Chapel, we've expanded greatly our audio and visual capability, our filming capability, et cetera. It's not just about sanitizing the building, but we also had our building completely chemically sanitized using an ionized process, because the ionized process actually eradicates whatever the diseases and or germs are in the facility and need to be maintained. There needs to be significant training of ushers or hiring of personnel on how to go in to bathrooms to make them ready after usage so that the next persons can use them. Keeping sanitized high touch areas like door handles and the like, looking at our ventilation systems to make sure they provide for the proper type of ventilation. And we might have to offer, ladies and gentlemen, multiple services because we can't put our normal numbers in churches, with the ability to go behind those multiple services and ready them, as well as a revisitation of how we are doing communion, a revisitation of how we're doing baptism. And one of the things that's also happening significantly in Nashville, I heard Lee Chapel mention as far as vaccines, but all of the Nashville area AME churches are working together as it relates to how we do services. And like Payne Chapel will be doing a vaccine site in a couple of weeks. And so engaging in the sanitation of your carpets, if your pews have cushions on them, they need to be sanitized. Door rails, handrails, et cetera, all high touch places. And then installing touchless hand sanitizing machines so that people can access them. Now I'm going to stop right there. This, like I said, this was a lot to talk about in a little bit of time, but I'll leave some for the other groups.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was very informative and right on target. I appreciate that. And then so our last breakout session, Sister Carolyn Jackson will report out. Unmute yourself, Sister Carolyn.
Okay. All right, I'm unmuted. Thank you, Sister Paula. This is a report from room 4, and I appreciate the input from all of the participants. We talked about temperature gauges at one entrance. When we come back into the church, there'll only be one way to come back in, and your temperature will be taken at that entrance. We talked about sanitizing stations. Make sure your insurance coverage is up to date. Definitely follow the CDC guidelines. There was a suggestion or has been put in place that photos will be taken and no Bibles or hymn books will be touched. We're talking about 5 or 6 member choir members stationed 6 feet apart. vaccinations are planned. And one suggestion was to have the smaller churches contact the larger churches for their help in getting things set up, like technical help and other things that they may be needed. There was also a suggestion that we talk to the youth group and the senior citizens group separately to find out what their concerns are in re-entering the church. And, input their input into the plan to come back into the church. Thank you.
Thank you, Sister Carolyn. Appreciate that. And I misspoke. We have one more group, group 5, which our leader is Redia Walker, Dr. Redia Walker.
Thanks.
Okay.
I appreciate my group input, excellent ideas. And I, of course, haven't heard the other 4 groups. I certainly hear repetitious information, which is not unusual in discussing an issue such as this. One of the main suggestions that was made was that the church should poll its congregation to find out who plan to return to church and those who do not plan. And at least they have some numbers to work with as they prepare to reopen. And then, of course, the next step would be to train those who wish to return with rules to follow upon their re-entrance to the building. They should also consider planning the order of service with respect to the number of people who fill the spaces for each activities. For example, you have Sunday school in the morning, and so you have a smaller group than the regular church service. So as plans are made, those issues should be considered and in terms of those spaces and the usage of those spaces. And then also consider how often we sanitize and clean those spaces. There's a comment about the choirs, how many people should resume, how many members of the choir and the way in which they are spaced, how many songs they should sing. If we're accustomed to hearing 3 or 4 songs during the service, do we have to do that as we reopen? Maybe just a couple of songs. And then some recordings and maybe sometimes just a solo. Another point that was made is that we need to poll members to find out who's been vaccinated and continue to promote getting the vaccine. Then the last point is consider broadcasting the service, continuing to do that along with in-church service, because there are people who will be unable to attend in person, and some would choose not to, but they can continue to hear the service via Zoom. I think that's a summary.
Well, thank you, Dr. Redia Walker, and all those who were willing to on the slide to be our recorders. I do appreciate you all for doing that, my church members, and for all those who participated in the breakout sessions. At this time, I'll turn it back over to Sister Bessie Jackson.
Thank you so much, Sister Paula. And I must say, I am so very pleased. As Dr. Singfield said, it is an ambitious task, not only for the 15 minutes that you were given here, but in developing the contingency plan for reopening anyway, because there's so many things to consider. And actually, we had some very, very, very great suggestions. So I hope everybody had their action plans out, because There were certainly many things that you can take back. And I was so pleased to hear it. I'm also so pleased to hear you talk about continuing the online services, because that's something I'm going to talk about in just a few minutes, because I too think it is tremendously important for various reasons. But before I move forward, I would again like to thank you all. You did a tremendous job in a short period of time, had some wonderful ideas, and I'm glad that everybody had a chance, and I hope you made notes of them so that you don't forget them, and take them back to your church and your congregation and expand those. And as you do so, please continue to share with us. I'm hearing such wonderful things coming out. I'm just anxious to keep hearing all that I can. I certainly appreciate it. I'm going to move forward now because I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the new rules that we're going to have to follow. And I'm going to get more into the digital worship. I'm so glad you heard about that. You mentioned that, because that is so important. But we do have some new rules that we must follow, because simplicity will be vitally important as we go back. Worship service gatherings will be smaller, as we've mentioned in our feedback that we just got. Digital worshipers will emerge. Hugging may disappear, and that will be replaced by the genuine eye-to-eye smile that we have. Instead of hugging each other, we'll give each other a smile. And that may have to take up some of the things we've missed with that personal contact that we used to have. Now, the pastor's handshake will disappear. So you're going to probably have to replace that with an eye-to-eye contact and a heartfelt smile, accompanied by a nod to show love and respect there. There will be new rules for communication that we will follow. Singing will be suspect, and I know we mentioned that, but we still have to think about the fact that as we sing, we do project things into the air. So we have to think about that. So that's still going to be suspect by some people also, and how that's placed and done is important. Now, the offering plate will mostly disappear and be replaced with online giving, or you may have some designated receptacles. People will not want to handle cash as much as they did with the in-person services we used to have. So that's something we must think about. And online giving gives us a unique and very expanding opportunity. So we may have to have some lessons to teach our people to do that. The leaders, ushers, greeters, teachers will sanitize more often, as you'll see them going through services. And that'll give an opportunity for churchgoers to sanitize. There'll be places for them to do that as some of the new rules that we follow. There would be different levels of social distancing versus depending on the vulnerable populations. I heard someone say that they suggested having services by age group, and that may be something you would consider, because you do have to think about the safety of everybody. And of course, as I mentioned, shorter services and meetings will be better than longer ones. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that too as we go. Now, digital giving will be the standard, and I mentioned that. The offering plate will disappear. And I'm strongly suggesting that we explore resources for providing digital giving in our church. There will still be giving perhaps in designated receptacles, and I'm going to ask our tech team. I know that they are aware of some resources that are available for digital giving that is very good. Because you should be receiving 60% of your digital gifts right now. If you're not, you should give some thought to that, and then you expect that to grow. As I mentioned, fewer people will want to handle the offering plates or the buckets. Fewer people are going to want to touch cash. And you're going to find, because of that, a dramatic decrease in non-digital giving. So you need to train, as I mentioned, people to be able to give online. And most of the ways that you do that is fairly easy. And it's an excellent opportunity to expand your fundraising. Just think with digital giving, you can expand that across the whole globe with opportunities for people to give. And I think they're finding that it's happening even during this pandemic time. So you have an opportunity to broaden your market and expand your giving beyond your church members and beyond your community. It's a tremendous opportunity. Now, there are church members who will not return after the pandemic. As a result of the mandated ending of in-person worship, people got used to watching religious services online, on television, and some of them for the first time. Of course, when you're worshiping online, you can't hug other members or give them that special eye contact. And you can't shake hands or give the minister that special nod that you'll have to do after the post-pandemic church. But you can wear whatever clothes you want to wear. You can turn the volume up and down. You can eat breakfast, cook dinner, wash your clothes. Forget about traffic. You don't have to worry about trying to get there. And you can easily check out other services too. Across town, and you can check out services across the country. So we've gotten to kind of like watching services online. So what does this mean for the future of our church members who don't return after the pandemic? Now, some people have suggested that we've gotten used to doing more shopping online as a result of the pandemic. It greatly increased. And as you can see, some businesses are going out and some businesses are giving up their physical locations as a result of the pandemic, because we got more reliant on the internet, not only for shopping, but for going to work. We started working more at home. We went to school on home. We started doing virtual health visits with our doctor. And we started doing more entertainment online. And we started to move to various religious experiences, started moving online. And we expect that to grow also. Now, some of the church members who may not return are probably things that you've already thought about. And some of these groups are overlapping. Now you've got the church member that is sort of tenuous. They come and they go. So they're already flimsy in the church connection. So they may disconnect and may not return to in-person church attendance afterwards. You've got the decreasing church member. You notice some members, they started to come once a month, once every other month, and then once every 6 months, and then they get there on Easter and Christmas. So COVID-19 got them comfortable with not going to church. And when they feel that they wanted to have some worship, they just tune in online. You've got church members who they gather to church. It's sort of a it's a priority on par with other activities like going to the ball game and going to other activities. It becomes sort of a social thing. They don't really have that commitment, so they may start watching online and not come back into church. And then you've got the disconnected member. And we should always be aware of this. You've got members who only come to church. They have no connection with no other groups in church. You see them on Sunday and they may wave, or they're out the door by the time you say the benediction. So they have no connection. And I call them the disconnected member. The pandemic has sort of made them comfortable with not attending church as regular. Now, most adults say that they will be attending church. Many adults, I will say, will be attending church because, as we've mentioned, the the pandemic has increased for some a greater faith than we had, or strengthened our faith. I would say a deeper faith. Let me put it that way. Now, a lot of churches, or some churches, are going back to church. They're getting prepared for Easter. And about 4 in 10 Christians, about 39%, plan to go to church for Easter. Now, that's really about half of the percentage of Christians who normally go to church on Easter, which is typically about 62%. Now, but just 31% of people in our historical Black Protestant tradition say that they plan to attend Easter services this year. And of course, that is probably about half of what normally attends too. However, we survey, and I use Pew Research a lot. I've used Gallup sometimes, but I do several researches, but I like Pew. But anyway, based on their research, they indicate that Black Protestant Christians are more cautious about returning to church, to in-person worship, than their white adult Christians. And we were only looking at adults at that particular point. But, and I think that that has been true even with how things have acted and the reaction that we've gotten with the pandemic, that Black Protestants have been a lot more concerned about connecting. And that takes into consideration the evangelical church also. So without doing any editorials, I will leave that at that also. But Black Protestants probably will not be going back to church in larger numbers after for Easter, in other words. Now, you do have the constant critic church member, and that is the church member who complains about everything, the pastor, the choir, and everything. So their likelihood of attendance is low, of returning is low also. The pandemic kept us out of in-person worship for over a year. So it's given us a chance to get comfortable with not going into church. So these are some people who may not return. And then you've got the cultural church member who goes to church because it's the place to be socially. And they have found out during the pandemic that that is not the only way to be in the in crowd socially. So they may not return also. Now, it is impossible to predict how the behavior will actually change. And I go back to a survey that was done back in July, which is nearly a year. It was right after the pandemic. And at that time, more adults were anticipating returning to church because you hadn't been out quite as long. And I do that just to show you the difference with the difference a day makes, so to speak, the difference with the longevity of our being out of church. Because at that time, it was low that just 2% think that in the long run, they will end up watching TV, church on TV or Zoom or online, more so than in person. But that has grown, as I had just mentioned earlier, the longer we were out of church. Okay, I'd like to get some of your thoughts on that and follow up just a bit. We're just going to take a couple minutes because we've got a little ways to go in talking about some of the other things, including the digital church. So if you will unmute yourself and give me some of your ideas about the church members who will not return after the pandemic. and how their behavior will affect your church, what your thinking is there.
If you would, please announce your name when you unmute yourself before you speak. And thank you.
Okay, my name is Paulette Coleman from Lee Chapel in Nashville. I think we will have to be very intentional about understanding why people are not returning, but
Amen.
also moving forward to those who are returning and expanding to perhaps new ones. I don't think we do a very good job pre-pandemic in understanding why people drop off or leave. And just as in your employment, when you leave or get fired or whatever, they have an exit interview. Sometimes that kind of a thing will be helpful. I also think that I heard Bishop McKenzie talk, and she said that post-pandemic, and it's already been stated in this environment, that our services will be shorter, and
Sure.
those who insist on 2 and 3 hour services, she was talking to the clergy, might find themselves in there alone. So rethinking how we worship and how we do church will be critical.
Very, very true. Very true. Both of what you said are very true. And especially, and you mentioned before the pandemic, people would leave the church and we didn't follow up many times to see what happened. And often, there are very simple reasons, and with follow-up would have been the cure. So that was important too. And shorter services is going to be the key. Can I hear from someone else? I'm going to keep Sister Pauline up here.
Dr. Sinkfield has his hand raised.
Would you recognize Dr. Sinkfield?
Okay, thank you. Let me concur with what Dr. Paulette Coleman just said, and in fact, applaud it. One of the biggest concerns that we need to be careful about is, because we've been out of church now for a year, it would be, I think, a shame if we idealized what was actually going on before the pandemic. We don't need to do that and turn it into a good old days kind of assessment. Let's look at what really was happening. Thank you, Dr. Coleman, for pointing that out, and not attempt at all to retrofit an old way of thinking and being into where we are now. This is a different world we're going to immerse to, and I think that God is giving us a significant opportunity to rethink who we have been and what we have been. Not try to figure out how many choir members we can get in the stand and how few we can, et cetera, but think about whether or not we were actually being effective in ministry. And maybe God has invited us now to engage in an effective critique of what we were, so that we can appropriate that to what we're about to be. Thank you.
I certainly applaud you. I may get a little ahead of myself, but I've got to say this is probably in my presentation, but the key to our success is going to be adapt, adapt, adapt. And the reason I say that is because we have a mission, and if we get our model, which is the way we've been doing things and expecting something different, before our mission, we will fail. And one of the analogies that I like to think about or give is the horse and buggy. And the horse and buggy was a model. At that time, it was the model for our transportation. However, as things changed, we've now got airplanes, rockets, and what have you. The transportation industry is exploding because that was the mission, was the transportation, just like our mission for the church, and not the model or the way we've been doing things necessarily. The mission is exploding, but the model of the horse and buggy is in the museum. And if we don't change our way of doing things and look at what is going in, our church may be in the museum. And the mission will be carried on by others. So Dr. Sinfield, I'm sorry, and Dr. Coleman and others, I just applaud you for the input you've given.
Any others?
Yes, this is Alexis Heaston from Payne Chapel AME Church, and I would just like to piggyback on what Drs. Coleman and Sinkfield said. I think a major component of that is being proactive. As we look at our digital services, and I look at other denominations, we are not very proactive, and we're a little bit resistant when adapting to those changes. So I think the time is now to be preparing for our digital worships. There's some people who are not going to come back to the building, and that's fine. That's perfectly fine. We have to be proactive in preparing ourselves for our new avenue of worship.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Excuse me just for a minute. I just want to, we have our sister, our First Lady, Sister Shelby Strode, on here, and she has another engagement she has to attend, so she'll be getting off fairly shortly. And I just wanted her to greet us at this time, since she's got to leave. If she could, and if she has any thing to add to this discussion at this time. Sister Shelby Strode?
Yes, thank you, Sister Paula, and thank you, Sister Bessie. You, of course, I didn't expect anything less from you. You are always such a perfectionist, and you're good at what you do. God has truly blessed you. And to all of our ministers and friends and all who are gathered, I greet you in the name of our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. This has been most informative. And not only is it informative, it's a wonderful fellowship, because I get to see so many of my friends within the 13th Episcopal District. And I'm going to have to be perfectly honest, I have been invited by one of our sister churches to model in their fashion show. Pray for me. I don't feel like it, but I gave my word. And the scripture tells us that our word is our bond. I love all of you and thank you for the opportunity. And I'm sure that Pastor Strode, I don't think his Board of Examiners meeting is going to be as long as usual. So you are in wonderful hands. Thank you all so much. And again, thank you, Sister Bessie. Thank you so much. And thank you, Sister Paula. You all be blessed and have a wonderful Lord's Day. Bye-bye.
Thank you, model well, and we are just so glad that you were able to join us.
Thank you, Sister Bessie. Thank you.
Let's see, I don't think I see any other hands, so if it's okay.
Sister Carolyn Jackson.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yes.
Oh, that's all right. I would just like to add that some of the programs that we instilled before we were, before we had to leave church did not work. And I think what we need to do is start all over again, be brand new, and come up with some new plans to help our congregation to grow. Some of the programs we implemented last year did not enhance our congregation. And I think we need to look at those, recognize them, realize they didn't work, and come up with something different.
Amen.
Yeah, this is Constance. I also would like to piggyback on my buddy, Sister Carolyn, but I think our perspective on this needs to be around creativity as opposed to just assessment, because sometimes when we're faced with challenges, our first reaction is, in fact, to assess it and move forward. But on some level, I think the pandemic has taught us that we are just a very creative group of people, and that things that we never thought we'd be able to manage through, we have actually done that. So I'm excited about what this opportunity presents to us, and I'd like for people to get excited with me. And as I said in our group, I just think that there is talent among us, particularly in the digital space and with our young people, and we just need to make sure that we invite them in and give them an opportunity to share with us what they think will work as well.
And also, Sister Constance, I think that this gives us an excellent opportunity to explore new ideas, and I am so excited, even though I'm 80-some and over the hill.
Amen.
I am so excited. Looking
I'm with you,
forward
Sister
to new
Beth.
things. You don't get too old to learn, and
Absolutely.
I'm willing and ready.
All right.
Willing and ready.
Sister Bessie, Sister Bessie, this is Betty Young, St. Paul, Lexington. And I just want to give another viewpoint of the workshop today. And we had a previous workshop that involved some community leaders, a health worker, someone in the mental health field. These workshops are also helping our folks, if they're still working out in the community and on their jobs. And especially for myself, I've been able to fall back on some of the things that I've learned in the workshops that have helped me on my job, because you don't always receive the support that is needed from your peers and from your supervisors for those of us who are still working. So this has proved to be very excellent in my case. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Sister Betty. Thank you, Sister. Thank all of you. I do take what Sister Constance has said also. In fact, we're getting such good feedback. I'm just enjoying it. I'm having a tendency to just want to listen to you guys and not move on, but I will move on. But creativity is important because, as we mentioned earlier, look at what you're doing and how you can do things differently. And as Sister Carolyn has said, that we look at what we don't need to have and what we can change, because there are a lot of things that we do have that don't even contribute to the mission of our church. And when I say our, I'm just saying in general, that we often have things that don't contribute to the mission of the church. And we need to look at those and see how we can do things differently. We're getting such good feedback. Yes, ma'am.
We, in the essence of time, we're gonna, I think it's time for our break, or take 5 before we move on, so we can stay on track for our, thank you. So that gives Mom a chance to, Bessie, my mom, a chance to get some water and for everybody, if you need to get a cup of coffee, a soft drink, or something to snack on, we're going to take a 5-minute break here, and then we'll continue on with this excellent presentation. And so you can stretch your arm.
Expertise. So if you don't have technical skills, give help. Reach out to people, though, who know Zoom and social media, because you're going to need all of those: streaming, chat rooms, YouTube, you name it. It's important to expand your digital platform to the extent possible. Now, the good thing about it is that the digital media, the electronic media, will make your church accessible to everybody with a computer or a telephone, even in the rural church areas. In other words, proximity is no longer a driver of church growth. If you've got a computer or a telephone, you can tune into your church service. And that puts you on equal footing with every church on the globe. Now, so digital is an opportunity for significant ways to build and expand your church with members in the community and in the world. Now, when we think about going digital, we need some leadership there, both. And I recommend that leadership be both hybrid, be hybrid, both digital and in person, because the two need to mirror each other. Because the pandemic has forever changed how we work, how we live, how we play, and it has changed how we worship. It accelerated digital transformation in the businesses. You find more of them are doing work at home and so forth. And so they and the churches had to really move fast to try to harness the power and the platform. So a lot of people have grown as a result of the pandemic. It's been an opportunity to expand in that digital world. Now, the post-pandemic church will involve a must-have combination, as I mentioned, of physical and digital. And they have coined a phrase, a new expression, phygital, I have to say it right, phygital, which is the physical sphere and the digital sphere as a result of that combination being so important. The word been around for a while, but it wasn't coined to mean what it does now until the pandemic. The strategy will be to build the physical and digital church to provide a unique interactive experience for both members and the community, where the two worlds are blended into one. And I'm going to repeat that. They need to be blended into one. The expectation is that the physical experience matches the digital experience. In other words, you don't have one physical church that lasts 3 hours in a digital church. Content is important. It becomes even more important because of the digital world and being able to connect with people and to have a seamless flow to meet people where they are, both physically and digital. So you need to establish a church website. And that doesn't have to be complicated. You don't have to have a complicated site. You can have a simple site, but you must have good content. And I put content, because that will bring people to your site. If there's nothing to see, they won't come. You need to have online and text giving so that people can give and make their donations online, either way, by phone, computer, or text. They can do it by notebook, cell phone, what have you. You need to have a digital broadcasting platform. The one we're on today is Zoom. There are others. GoToMeeting, and there are several different ones out there. And you need to investigate what you can do with that. Zoom offers a free one, but the free one is very limited, so you may consider other options, but those platforms are there. You need a social media page. Years ago, a lot of people weren't on social media, but it's amazing who is on social media if they're not on anything else, because Facebook has gotten to be a communication tool. But again, you have to have content on there that will encourage people to come, inspirational messages or what have you. And you need to be able to reach out and invite people so they'll know it exists. You can have a Facebook page that nobody knows about too, unless you reach out and share that information. You can also have one good way to get people interested in your Facebook page is allow them to share stories. However, in this day and age, you should have a pre-approved process for those stories so that you make sure the content does not conflict with your mission and what you want on the page. But when you allow people to share and invite members to come in, you can greatly expand that Facebook page, and you can do that for free, but you can also share information that will make people want to know more about your church and help your church grow. Now, most paper bulletins never make it out of the building when we had in-person worship. People looked at them early on or doing service, and then they left them on the seats. But you can do digital e-bulletins or newsletters and send that out. And now people get their email on their telephones and what have you. And you can do that for little or nothing. It doesn't cost as much to send out e-bulletins as it does to print your bulletins. And you can send out newsletters and do your announcements and really have a communication flow with not only your members, but also your community and other people. MailChimp is one that I know is free, and you can have up to 2,000 contacts on MailChimp for free. So that's important to know. You need to think about having mobile connection cards where the visitors can sign up online and let you know who they are and give you their information for future contact. And as Dr. Coleman mentioned, where we can reach out to them and invite them to become part of our to regularly participate, become part of our body. You get that information. You can do that online. Also, you can have the digital connection cards that will allow your members to update their information so that you can stay in contact. And that information can be set up to go directly to your ministry leaders so they can quickly get that information and be able to stay in contact with people. And communication, digital, in person, is so very important. You can retweet sermon points. It's important. And I see that on Twitter a lot and even on Facebook, where people put in their sermon points, their messages. And on Facebook, you can tweet a connection so that they can go back and watch earlier worship services and messages and events and so forth. So you can live tweet sermon points before your service to encourage people to want to come in and visit with you that for that service or that meeting or that event. You can have a church book Twitter page for no cost, just like Facebook, and you can tweet before and after, so to speak. And then you can encourage your members to retweet and share. And also, you'd be surprised at how many people in the community and in the world will see something interesting and see something they enjoy and they want to share it with others. People like to share good things. So you would be surprised how far reaching all that can be. As you can share your meetings, your activities, and these mediums, Facebook, YouTube, and with Twitter, are free for your congregation. And they're simple to use. It may take a little practice, but you can use those and help expand and help draw in people, expand your mission, expand your communication, and draw in people. You can provide playlists on digital platforms of your sermons, your worship songs, or what have you, so that when you're riding, people are riding in the car or going down the street or doing their exercises, and you see these cell phones or some strapped on their wrist, they're watching, they're listening to your worship songs and listening to your ministers preach. So there are so many ways. It takes a little planning, it takes a little thought, but a lot of these mediums are open to you and are very accessible to you. Now, we're going to look a little bit at consumer shopping and channel flipping. Because COVID, as devastating as it was, or is, it still is, it's a wake-up call. As we've mentioned throughout the presentation, it's an opportunity to expand our church and our ministries. Now, before the pandemic, a typical church digital program was focused on converting someone stopping by the church website, even if you had one, or stopping by the church building. But we wanted to get them in the church to visit. Now the focus is much more on online engagement, because you have people who are not going to want to come back readily because they're going to want to cook dinner. After the COVID pandemic, suspension of in-person worship and events, we had to scramble to come up with a plan for digital worship, both live and recorded, because we wanted to keep our members engaged. So we went, those who didn't have Zoom went to Facebook Live, a lot of churches, and then we went to Zoom. But 6 months into the pandemic, it became clear that keeping the faithful and expanding online congregants required greater attention to content, and call to action messaging, and audience engagement and connection. Because there were many churches were more accessible without driving across town, because many churches were virtual, and people were no longer limited by their geography. We've got people here from Tennessee. If they wanted to tune in to the churches in Kentucky, all they had to do was tune into the channel, not drive. So watching a religious service became just as easy as watching Netflix. It was just a click away, so to speak. And it's one thing to play a video of a message that you can get anywhere in the world. You can get the same message and content anywhere in the world. It's another thing to connect to a community that where you're comfortable and where you get familiar and enjoy. And one of the things you want to do in the digital world is expand your church community. And then people become comfortable, they become familiar, so they want to tune into you. They don't want to do the channel flipping. So what you want to do is to encourage through your digital process, as well as your in worship process, loyal followers. And that's harder to do on the digital process because it is so easy to switch the channel. You need to encourage people to become a part of your worship community by encouraging them to gather online into small group meetings and activities so that they can become familiar with the church community. That can be a call to action, a call to get them more involved into the church, even though on a digital platform, so that they can become loyal followers. Now, you got to think of one thing though. The attention of a digital congregant, a digital person, is much shorter than an in-person worshiper. Shorter services are important to keep your digital congregant on the channel because they're in the living room, they're comfortable, they're in their sandals, and they're in their bathrobe or what have you. So they can easily flip. Now, one of the things that we've got to think about, though, is that with the in-person worshiper, they looked at their cell phones or what have you, but you had them. And to get up and walk out of church, everybody could see you. But on digital, they can flip. So you've got to think of that content and think of how you can keep them. And you're not going to keep them for 2-3 hours. One of the things that we think about, even for the session today, is how long can we have you online before you want to pull your hair out. So it's always important to think of sessions. When I do sessions online, I used to do 8-hour sessions in person, maybe for a couple of days, but 8-hour sessions. We can't do that online anymore. People will not sit and listen to a workshop for 8 hours. Let's talk a little bit about the neighborhood church, which is a major part of our heritage. Now, for many of us, the neighborhood church accounts for much of our growth, of our early spiritual growth. Many of us remember going to the neighborhood church and participating as children in the Sunday school and the Easter program and saying our little speeches, and we learned a lot about the church. And I know in the AME church, that's why I have committed to memory most of the rituals and everything, because we learned those as young people and growing up in the church. But as the neighborhood changed, the church didn't change with it. In many instances, we became more inwardly focused, and in some instances, we became smaller and more like a religious club. Now, other churches failed to remain relevant to new neighbors and younger generations who were moving into the neighborhood. And they resisted change for no other reason than the status quo. And I'm going a little fast because I know we're moving time, so I'm going to try to go through this so we can get through. And I'll be glad to answer any questions as we go along or at the end of the session. But the younger generation grew weary of the battles to resist change. And the new neighbors and the younger generations moved to newer and larger churches, or they dropped out of the church altogether because the church wasn't responding to what their needs were. But the pandemic forced a new interest as far as in our transformation, because we had to rediscover that the church was not closed. The church is not dead. The church is the people. The church facility was closed. The church building was closed. What happened was we had to reach out differently, and we became more people-oriented. We got away from that building because we became more oriented into gathering with people, which sometimes being in the building didn't give us as much emphasis all the time, okay? When the freedom to gather together was taken away, we did reach out more to our neighbor. We invited people to come in and worship, which before we just went to the building, and if they came, they didn't, but we had to invite them to come in. We started having community forums, as many of us have mentioned here today. And we started doing prayer meeting and prayer ministries, and we started doing small group meetings that we were inviting more people to come in. We were sending out Zoom and Facebook messages and announcements saying, come and join us, come and join us. I know after our services, we have what we call an open mic where everybody gets off and hugs everybody virtually. They say, good to see you, I'm here, blah, blah, blah. Have a blessed week, because we're doing virtual hugs. But we have found a way to reach out to people differently. We are reconnecting with the communities. Churches are discovering that they can't exist as a meaningful extension of God's ministry if they are focused exclusively on themselves. It is God's work, but with our hands here on earth. With this wisdom and insights and inspiration, the experiences gathered during COVID-19 gives us that opportunity to have a healthier post-pandemic church. The healthier church will be the neighborhood church, going back to the church, the post-pandemic church, the new normal. It will be much healthier if we become I call neighborhood or community church, where we continue to reach out and expand and find out why people have stopped coming into churches or tuning into our services, and reach out to them. Now, there are some failures to avoid in leading change, and we need to think about those, because leadership is our responsibility as we go into this post-pandemic church, the new normal. We will work with our minister, our pastor, and our different ministries to come with a plan to have a post-pandemic church under the new normal. Now, change is obvious and undeniable fact of life. We're continually going through it every day. It really means to make or become different. Now, change for the healthy church is moving forward and not standing still. As was mentioned in our discussion, creativity, moving forward, using our skills and our thoughts to reach. Change is preparing for the post-pandemic, the new normal. Leading change is one of the most important roles of church leadership. Visionary leaders don't compel people to stay the same. The healthy church will not run from change, but it will take advantage of change. If you run from change, you will not be a healthy church. Resistance to change is one of the most important roles of our church leadership, but it is also one of the most difficult and challenging roles of our church leadership. And resistance to change is that challenge. It is highly likely that even your most loyal members will resist change. Understanding why people resist change, though, will help guide you through the change. If key members of the church are not on board, the change is not going to last in the church. Now, resistance to change manifests itself in many ways, from foot dragging to inertia, to just petty sabotage and outright rebellion. I've been doing it this way, and I don't see why I should change. Change is my role, so I don't want to change. I like being the director of the organization. But you can't lead your church in change without love. And I put that in all capitals. We have to have love in all we do. And you certainly can't lead your church in change without love. You have to understand that every member is likely to respond differently. And if they fear the change, they will respond differently. They're not going to say, well, I fear change. They will sabotage it or do other things to try to respond differently to the change. So you're going to have to spend more time than you normally do with each of the members involved individually. You're going to have to give them time to come together to discuss the change and their concerns so that they can identify with the opportunities to help each other. And that's a key. You got to spend time to get buy-in, to get people to understand that the change is not something that they should fear, but it's also an opportunity to help them grow and become better at what they do. Because change will occur when the members believe the benefits of making the change outweighs the cost. That's in membership and in finances and all aspects of the church. They've got to understand and believe, not just understand, but they've got to believe that the change will outweigh the cost of staying the same. The shift in attitude is not going to come overnight. So that means that you've got to start planning for that change early. So it's going to mean more work for you, but it's actually going to be better for you in the long run. And, you know, I think it's very important when you get people to buy into change that you've got to bring them in early. Because when they don't know what's going on, gossip will certainly take over. And if they don't know, they will make it up. And that's a lot harder to overcome because uncertainty will give them more of a wall to change. So, but if you bring them in early and you keep them informed and you get their input and their ideas, as we've talked about earlier, then they become a participant in that change and they can buy into that change as you go along and help expand it. And that is the most important. If you've gone down the road and start making changes and then later on you come and tell me, well, this is what we're going to do, people are not going to buy into it because they don't understand it, and you have resentment and a ripple effect. So it's important that you get that buy-in early, and you take it slow, but you plan it early. Okay? Because God has sent a clear message and a powerful wake-up call to the whole world in the form of the COVID-19. It was a wake-up call, and it was an opportunity. It was a challenge like no other we've had in recent history. But we do have to understand that the post-COVID-19 pandemic world is gone. And we need to ask ourselves, and from what I've got the feedback today, I believe we are ready. I believe we are thinking about, and we understand the adaptation and the resilience that we need. But I believe we're ready and we're getting prepared to recognize and understand the implementations for the post-pandemic church, the new normal. I'm going to ask that you have make a note, I talk too fast and too much. I'm trying to get through, but I'm going to ask if you have put some thoughts on your action plan, because that is important. We have had such good feedback, and we've had such good feedback from our audience today. It is it's marvelous. It's a miracle. I am so heightened by the feedback that we've got. But now I'd like to get a few thoughts from you, and I know that we are really just about out of time. We've got a few minutes, but I'd like to get some final thoughts from you as we end up our training for today. So if you open your mic and let's just hear from you. Let's hear some of those good thoughts again.
Please announce your name when you come on. Thank you.
Good afternoon. This is Janice Davis. I'm a member of Payne Chapel AME Church in Nashville. And Sister Jackson, I just want to thank you for your stellar presentation and all the information shared in this workshop. And I am just confident that from the post-pandemic church to the new normal, that we all have gained something, and it will help us as we move forward in our churches. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you so much. I certainly appreciate you being here and your feedback.
Okay, this is Janice Ford. I'm a member of St. Paul in Lexington. Miss Best, I have really enjoyed your presentation, and I've enjoyed the participants today. And we all must remember we got a lot to absorb, but we must remember God's in control, and we'll get through this, and we'll get through this together.
Wonderful.
Sister Bessie, this is Constance Kennedy from St. Paul. And I just want to thank you particularly for this digital piece that we just completed. The two things that come into my mind almost instantly is, even when this pandemic is over, you know how we couldn't have church because there was so much snow on the ground? Now we can. You know, and also in dealing with our sick and shut in, one of the things that we still do know is that there really is a digital divide. And so I think we need to continue to focus on our sick and shut in and our elderly. Maybe we should consider things like floating laptops and things like that. But I think this presentation actually helps us think and again, leverage our creativity. But those two things came to my mind immediately. And thank you very much, my sister.
Thank you, sister. Thank you, Sarah.
If I could just interject just 1 minute. For those who have not filled out the evaluation, I think I've got about 6 people who have not filled out. Please, it's in process now. Please go ahead and fill that evaluation out. We appreciate that. Thank you. Continue on with the question.
This is Margaret McKinley. I'm in Murfreesboro, Tennessee at Allen Chapel Church. And I just want to thank you, Ms. Jackson. This has been wonderful. It's kind of helped us think outside the box. And I'm sure that you have blessed more churches today than you will know.
Thank you. Thank you. I just have to add that the one thing that made this presentation so great, we had some good people. We had wonderful people. I think you all rehearsed before you came, didn't you? Because the feedback that we got was just simply wonderful. Thank you so much. Are there other thoughts?
Hello, this is Rita Walker at St. Paul AME in Lexington. Sister Bess, that was a wonderful presentation. Lots of good information that I think each church can benefit from the results of those discussions. Good job. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I thank all of you so much. It was just my pleasure.
Mr. Jackson,
Yes,
this is
sir.
Presiding Elder Troy Merritt in Nashville, Tennessee Conference, Nashville District. I thank you for this perspective. Clergy need to hear it, and everybody needs to hear it together. Build a consensus on how to get things done. This is excellent. God bless you. Thanks, St. Paul, for sponsoring this event. Peace.
Thank you, Brother Troy. Thank you, Reverend Troy, very much for being here.
Sister Bessie, this
Yes.
Betty Morton Young, St. Paul, Lexington. Yes, it was another excellent presentation by you, of course. But I just wanted to mention, we talked about spinoffs and group meetings. I want to give credit to Sister Ella Smith for organizing the home workout or social religious workout that they do every Thursday on
The
Zoom.
gospel seated exercise.
Yes, thank you, Paula. I had a senior moment there. The gospel seated exercise. And with the help of Sister Janice Floyd, and this is reaching out to individuals at home who are unable to get out, but they do have a means of sort of coming together and a little workout at the same time, which is excellent, very excellent. Thank you.
Thanks for sharing that. It has been a good outreach for seniors, and it's a seated exercise that's done once or twice a week, I believe. It is a good opportunity for connecting and also exercising the body, because being around home and not getting out, you have a tendency to sit and not exercise. So it has been good, and maybe others will want to take that back too as some thoughts. Thanks for sharing that. I'd like to thank all of you. We've had such tremendously good feedback today that I think that is what has made this workshop successful for me. I think that it is important for me to get that kind of feedback, because that's what stimulates and makes me want to enjoy what I do, and I do enjoy what I do. So I certainly appreciate your feedback. And although we are coming to a close, we recognize that the journey that you have to reopen your post-pandemic church in the new normal is just beginning. And as I mentioned earlier, I've heard some wonderful plans and some wonderful thoughts. So I know that we are well on our way for phase 1 and phase 2 of that, in fact. But I do want you to take a moment to review your action plan and make sure you've got that updated, because as I mentioned, we've had such good feedback, but when we leave here, life is going to happen again, and we're going to get involved, and we might forget some of this. So I don't want us to forget any of the wonderful feedback and things that have happened. So please make sure that you have updated your action plan and your handouts are with you, so you can have those. Will be a key to guide you in putting together your plan. I purposely didn't go into the reopening plan with the appreciative inquiry and the SWOT and so forth, because I think that's something you have to do yourself. Let's see, I was looking to see, and I'm going to ask our tech team if we have any questions in our parking lot that have not been answered that we need to address. I don't see any, but I'm not good at doing the chat and doing the whole thing.
There is some very good information in there that Priscilla put in about different means of outreach, and using TechSoup supports nonprofit charities and libraries by providing access to donations and discounts for software, hardware, and services for major brands, which I know we use at St. Paul, and it's a very, very good way to get resources. Also, Restream is the best way to live stream your YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, and plus 30 streaming sites at once. Expand your audience with multiple streaming today. And then our church, St. Paul, uses Breeze church software. And this software makes it easy to manage your database of people, your membership, offering, online, and text giving. And it provides very good reports so you can kind of keep up with your membership. And then Equid. Equid is also a good e-commerce shopping cart, which is what we used for today's registration. And I hope that was made easy for you all to register. There are some other things in the chat. If you'll look, Izu is an opportunity for digital publishing or publications. And we use that for our annual church anniversary booklet, as well as our epistle newsletter. So people can receive that digitally. And it's just like a newspaper, you know, or a magazine you look at. And you, as you know, there might be some other companies that do that as well. Google for nonprofits, Microsoft for nonprofits. She put some very good information with links in there in the chat if you want to open those links and use and search and research that information. And then of course, yes.
Oh, I was just going to suggest also that if those could be just copied off and sent to the workshop participants after the workshop, along with the evaluation, then they can have more time to follow up on it too.
Correct. Yes, we will do that.
Okay.
So are we concluded, or?
I have concluded. I think I see Dr. Strode on the line. He was able to join us.
Yes.
I would like to say with all of this, and I appreciate all of the feedback you've given me. I appreciate the compliments, as well as the good information that you provided. And for me, it's always to God be the glory, because that's where our daily bread comes from. So to God be the glory. And I appreciate again. I'd like to ask Dr. Strode if he has a word.
Thank you, Sister. Okay. Thank you, Sister Bessie, for the leadership that you have shown during this workshop, and to our tech, Sister Priscilla, your daughter, and Sister Paula, your daughter, who's the president of our lay organization. I'm excited about what the Lord is doing. We have such great work. We thank Sister Betty Ann Morton for also being part of our tech work. I apologize for not being on earlier. I had a board of examiners today, and we're doing everything by virtual learning, and it's really working. And what I heard, Sister Bessie, is that in your presentation that the new normal is going to be somewhat different than the past. And that's good, because as we make the transition from watching to worship, I hope and pray that we will understand how God is moving in a mighty way. And I appreciate all of you and all the work that you've done. And God bless St. Paul, Lexington. And good to see all of my Tennessee friends who are joining us today. I see Dr. Sinkfield, and also Presiding Elder Merritt, known them from years, and Dr. Paulette Coleman, and Sister McKinney, and Brother Darwin Eldridge, and many more. I thank you all for joining us today, and I think I said enough.
Thank you, Pastor. I would like to turn it now back over to our lay president, Sister Paula Rudd.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate the remarks. Pastor got ahead of me. I just want to make just a few remarks myself. We all need to develop or expand our existing contingency plan for reentering our churches for the days ahead. We need to think outside the box, beyond the walls of our church. There is no going back. This workshop hopefully has provided a process to move forward, insight into the process for moving forward, for looking at what we need to do differently to gain a closer look at our members, our community, to help our church grow and to take inventory. And I want to really thank my mom, Sister Bessie Jackson, for an outstanding presentation, and knowing the time it took her to prepare, and the research she does is excellent. So I want to thank her, and I want to also thank our members of St. Paul, our lay organization who attended, and my church family at Historic St. Paul, and all the participants who came on today to be a part of this experience. And special acknowledgement to our Reverend Troy Merritt, presiding elder of Nashville, Darwin Eldridge, I'm sorry, and Dr. Sinkfield, Paula Holmes, and Melissa Robinson. I know there's many more I could mention, but I just wanted to say a special thanks to them as well. So at this time, I would normally ask for our pastor's remarks, but we will conclude this workshop with the lay benediction, and allow some of those who have not finished the evaluations to please do that. And we'll have a little open air time if anyone else has any comments.
I said in the chat that
Give us strength to weather the
Thank you all. You can open your mic if you want to fellowship a minute.
I think Dr. Paulette Coleman had a comment she was wanting to make when the music started.
Oh,
Oh,
sorry.
I'm so
I just
okay.
wanted to say that I think this workshop needs to be presented to the entire denomination. It is so chock full of information and creative thinking. So I'm going to see how we can make that happen.
Amen.